In this lesson, you'll learn a few more things about geometry. There are 5 terms I want you to learn. Point, which is a location in space. For example, this is a point that we call point A. A line is a collection of points going on infinitely in both directions. Infinitely means it goes without ending. So a line goes on forever and ever and ever. A line segment is part of a line that has 2 endpoints. So this is what a line segment looks like. It has 2 endpoints, and it's just kind of like taking a chunk of that line out, and that's what we call a line segment, which is mostly what we see in the world. So for example, this marker is a line segment because it doesn't go on and on forever. It is just a little piece of a line. A ray is part of a line that has 1 endpoint and continues infinitely in one direction. So it has the 1 endpoint and then it continues on infinitely or without ending in one direction. And our last term is an angle. An angle is 2 rays that share the same endpoint. Keep hearing that same name, that point. We keep going back to the point. The angle is basically just 2 rays put together that share an endpoint. It shares that common endpoint. Now, if we look closer at points, examples of points, let's say we have a graph paper, and I've already drawn on a triangle and a line. Now, depending on whether or not the line has an arrow at the end, tells you if it's a line versus a line segment. But looking at the points, I have point A, and this is just a point by itself. So I've put the point onto the graph paper, point A. Point B, point C, point D, point E. So I have my points named with a capital letter, which is usually how they're named. And some of them I've connected. If you look at points C, B, and D, they are all 3 connected to create a triangle. C and B is a line segment, B and D is a line segment, C and D makes a line segment. So those 3 line segments together makes a triangle. If we look here at E and D make a line. And you can tell the line because it has the arrow in both directions. Now if we look at these lines, and in a few minutes you'll learn that they're called perpendicular lines, they share a common point. The point is right in the middle. So these 2 lines, they cross over at one point. Here is an angle. They share an endpoint. Here's, say, maybe an ice cream cone has a little point on the end. And if you think about a cube, if you feel a cube, has several points on the ends. So those are examples of points. Okay, let's look closer at lines and line segments. Again, a line has an arrow pointing both ways. A line segment has 2 endpoints, so it stops. A line segment stops. It's just a piece of a line. So if we were to look at this example, point A, point B, point C, and I've connected them with a line, I could take a chunk of it out and say, okay, that's called line segment AB, just that little section, and I would rank that with a little line, capital A, capital B, and call it line segment AB. If I were to talk about the whole line, I would put capital A, capital C with an arrow going both ways for my line. So that would be line AC, going on forever and ever. And there are other things you can find in there, but those are 2 examples from that. Let's take it to a real life example. Let's say we have streets. Okay, some streets, it may seem like they go on forever and ever, but most streets and lines, like I said earlier, are line segments. So if we look at these line segments, there are 3 different types of lines and line segments. First, there are parallel lines. And if you notice with the two L's, I made arrows, I made two lines with them. I like to remember parallel because it has those two L's. It helps me remember what they look like. So parallel lines, they go perfectly side by side and they never intersect. So it can't even be connected, it can't even be slanted a little bit, otherwise eventually it will intersect. So parallel lines are lines that lie in the same place and do not intersect. If we were to look at an example, we can see Oak Street here and Church Street here are perfectly parallel. They will never cross over, they will never intersect. The second type of line, intersecting lines. So you've heard me say intersecting a lot. Let's see what that means. Lines that have one point in common. So for example, these two lines cross over, so they have that one point in common. If we looked at an example on the street, Church Street and Main Street are intersecting. Oak Street and Main Street are intersecting. Hill Street and Church Street, those two intersect. Hill Street and Oak Street. Hill Street and Main Street, if it looks like if you keep going up, Hill Street and Main Street will probably intersect a little further up the road. The third type are perpendicular. These are special intersecting lines that form a right angle where they intersect. That should say they, where they intersect. So if you look at this example, you'll see that they are perfectly straight up and down, perfectly side to side, so that it makes that perfect right angle. And you'll learn in a minute that a right angle is perfectly square, a square corner. Kind of like the corner of my board here is perfectly square. So if you were to look to see which streets are perpendicular, you would say Oak Street and Main Street are perpendicular. Church Street and Main Street are also perpendicular because they create that little square corner, otherwise known as a right angle. If we looked at another real life example, a tennis racket, you know those little teeny grooves in there? They're all little line segments that are running parallel to one another. Let's look closer at rays and angles. A ray, remember, has one endpoint and the other end goes on forever. An angle is two rays put together with a common endpoint. Let's look at this example. We have the points W, X, Z, Y, and then we have a number 4 and a number 5. We could call this one little section right here where we have a ray going this way, a ray going that way. We could call it an angle. We could call it angle 4. We could call it angle X. We could call it angle WXY. We could even call it WYXW. So angles have many ways to name themselves. If you look at this one over here, this one can be called YXZ or ZXY. We could call this angle 5 or angle X. But if you look at, notice I said angle X twice. So it's probably not a good idea in this case to say that this angle is called angle X or this one is called angle X, because then you wouldn't know which angle you were talking about. So indeed in this example you cannot call the angle X just X alone because it has two angles on that one end point. You would want to call it angle 5 or angle 4 or angle ZXY. If we look at some examples here, these shapes have angles in them. You can see on the corners, on the edges, or the sides, there are angles. Now there are 3 different types of angles. An acute angle, I like to remember this because it's a cute little angle. It's less than 90 degrees. and acute. A right angle makes that perfect square corner, that perfect 90-degree angle. And we can look to see if that works with a piece of paper. You can see if it's a perfect square corner, and it is, with a piece of paper, or a post-it note is a good way. Anything that has a perfect square corner, like the corner of my board. The last type is obtuse, which is greater than 90 degrees. It's a really big angle. So if we look at these three shapes here, let's see which angles we can find. All right, so this is a square. Now if we look, this angle, wow, that is perfectly square, which we would call a right angle. And anytime you're showing that it's a right angle, you want to mark that little box to prove that it's a right angle. If you look here, that's a really big angle, a very open angle, so we call that an obtuse angle. If we look here, that's a cute little angle, so this one would be an acute angle. And I see another right angle here, another right angle here, right angle, right angle. Let's see, this is obtuse, obtuse. All kinds of angles everywhere. Now, you now have a song to go with it to help us remember. Now, it's going to be hard to see me in the video put my arms out because, you know, you can't see me put my arms out. So I've drawn a picture of what I'm doing. You'll be able to see one side of my body. So it goes something like this. And this is what you'll need to do with your body as you go along. To the tune of Miss Susie Had a Steamboat. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, you got it? A line has two arrows, and then you put your arms, both arms straight out with your hand just straight, going on infinitely. Just like that. Goes on and on and on. A segment has two endpoints, and then you make fist on both hands, like that. A ray has only one, so then one hand has a fist, the other hand is going on forever. Just like this little guy. When I make a big muscle, and here he is making a big muscle on both sides, making a big muscle. When I make a big muscle, right angle's what I make. So right angle, you can see the right angle right here, that perfect square corner. Look at my square corner, and then you point to it. You can make it too. So let's sing it all together. A line has two arrows, goes on and on and on. A segment has two endpoints, a ray has only one. When I make a big muscle, right angle's what I make. Look at my square corner, you can make one too. Hopefully your singing's a little bit better than mine. Another song that will help you remember these features of geometry, to the tune of Frere Jacques. So, da 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 da. You got it? All right, you ready? It goes something like this. Line, ray, angle, which is which, which is which. Lines are never ending. And then you put both arms straight out, and you put both hands straight out. Rays are one-way sending. Again, you put one fist and then one arm out. So you got one fist and then the other arm straight out. Angles bend, angles bend. And for this is a lot of fun. You first start out angles bend, and you just kind of bend it all different ways. So you're kind of moving it all different places. You ready? Line, ray, angle, which is which, which is which. Lines are never ending, rays are one-way sending, angles bend, angles bend. Whew. All right, I hope you had fun singing. Keep singing that because I might ask you in class to sing it with me.